section of our channel. Good luck. Now, welcome this guy who was got a TV hit in just a minute, so I want to get right to him. He is the tax ninja, the former U.S. attorney, former assistant U.S. attorney, David Katz, should say. David, I was thinking about all the different things. I know you have a TV shot in a second because the world wants you, and I don't blame them. You're so good. So I want to start with something a little off the beaten track, and then I want to get to Trump and all the things that are looming as legal issues for him. So the thing that's off the beaten track, but is clearly it's captured a lot of our attention, is this Gwyneth Paltrow trial, which is associated with her having been involved in a ski accident. They say that she hit this other skier, right, and did damage to him. I mean, broke bones, etc., and then skied away. When that happens, is somebody legally liable?
Yes. The answer is that if they were negligent and they were not up to the duty of care, and that can be driving down the street, Mark, but it can also be, going down a ski slope. Now, there's an idea of assumption of the risk, that there are some kind of risky activities. But even so, you're entitled to be free of someone acting negligently towards you. The law in Utah is that whoever's more downhill has the right of way. So if you're above somebody and you hit them, then you're generally at fault. One of the interesting things about the case, Mark, is that it's not clear who was uphill from the other one and who was more downhill. There don't seem to have been independent witnesses to it. And, they're going down a beginner slope. People are not looking at all the other people going down the beginner slope. They're trying to get down the slope themselves, right, without having an accident. And so there's a lot of factual dispute about the case. And basically, the actress says that he ran into her, and he says he's about 76. I guess he's a retired doctor. He says that she ran into him. One of the problems is that he says that on account of the accident, he now has brain damage, unfortunately, which makes it more difficult, I guess, to credit him as a witness when he says how it happened. But the accident happened 7 years ago. So his memory of it was, when he was 69 years old. And then there's been some statements that there's some camera work. Somebody took like a movie camera of it, and there's a reference to it in an email, but no one has produced that. Now, if that was made by his side, they're going to say, well, you had evidence and you didn't disclose it in the trial. They may say that, no, you had control of that document. You should have produced it. It may be that nobody has control of it and that it's just a mystery, and that whatever the reference was in the email. The case has apparently already been dismissed once, and then it was refiled. They're both suing each other. She's basically suing for $1 and her attorney's fees. He's suing for, I think, about $300,000, which when you consider what it costs to litigate a case like this. But I think that part of it is, his reputation, her reputation, definitely, she doesn't want to be seen as not only a negligent skier, but as one who kind of wasn't concerned. That's kind of been one of the allegations, that she wasn't really concerned about him.
Right.
When
it's
the
a bad look
happened.
that after the accident, she, supposedly skied away with her party. So it sounds like if you can throw enough of a cloud over who was uphill and downhill, that the case becomes probably one of those cases that you just won't get a judgment in your favor on, right?
Well, they'll probably rule for somebody, or they'll have a hung jury. You can have a hung jury in a civil case too. They may settle. A lot of civil cases settle because after a while you spend so much on lawyers, and what's the real prospect of getting them back? At least according to the news coverage, she is thinking about calling the two children of the doctor, which I can say as a trial lawyer myself, former federal prosecutor, usually not a good idea to call as your witnesses somebody who's in the family of the other side, because they're going to zing you. They're not, you're supposed to ask them until they're taken as a hostile witness, which you often see in the movies or TV. You have to question them like any other witness. You have to ask them open-ended question, and then they can give you a little zinger back, or they can, my daddy was in such great shape until you hit him. He's not the man that he used to be. He suffered so much. He cried on my shoulder. And you think, wow, that was a great witness that I just called.
Wow, yeah, you could dig your own hole there. All right, quickly now to Trump. This, as you've mentioned before, and just to catch everybody up, I think you and honestly, you were the first person I heard this from, and the first place I heard it, and that is that these should be federal charges that are brought against Trump, and instead we're seeing state charges that are stepping forward. I mean, so if a charge can step forward, but this first case is the least egregious probably of these crimes that Trump is going to be accused of. What's happening? Can you bring us up to speed? What you're anticipating, and then give us the state of the state, please.
Well, first I have until 22 minutes after, so we're not in that much of a hurry.
Okay.
The whole world is fascinated with this story. I was on London Times, the Times of London radio, drive time London this morning, because people are so
fascinated with
this case. And by the way, I heard you on KFI yesterday while I was driving around LA, and you were terrific. I'm not just saying that because I'm on your show. You were terrific. I sat out there in the rain and just listened to you for a while.
That's so nice. Thank you so much.
Between noon and 1 yesterday, yes. Yeah. That's what 6:40 a.m. right down here in Los Angeles.
And in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I've been really concerned about this. I never bought into Trump's rhetoric that the Democrats were out to get him. I thought that he committed so many crimes he got himself. I think the New York Times had the 1,000+ lies that he told that they could document, and all the misconduct. And so I think it's ironic that this is playing a bit into his narrative. It's playing a bit into the Democrats just want to get me for something, and here is this Democratic elected a district attorney, and he's getting me on something that the feds didn't even want to pursue me for, because that is a real thing. And if I could just go back and do the Michael Cohen case just a little bit. First, Michael Cohen, his lawyer and fixer, wasn't only in trouble for this thing with Stormy Daniels and the hush money. He was in trouble for state tax violations. And at least according to the reporting, they had him dead to rights on underpaying his state taxes, which he could have been prosecuted in state court for. Michael Cohen could have been. He also did something with the taxi medallions, whereas taxi medallions were going down in value in New York City because Uber and Lyft were being used so much more. He continued to value the medallions at the same amount, which meant that he was going to banks and saying to banks, just like Trump did, in my opinion, give me $1 million, give me more than I'm entitled to because I have these really valuable medallions. And he wasn't properly valuing them. He was inflating them. So there was a lot of commentary at the time that Michael Cohen, rather than go to Rikers Island, where the controller of the company is right now on state tax charges, this Weisselberg, rather than risk going to Sing Sing prison, he said, look, I don't want to go this state route. Leave me alone on the state side. I will accept these federal charges. And so that is why the fact that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to these federal charges involving the hush money and Stormy Daniels and the $130,000 that was mischaracterized doesn't necessarily mean even that he was so guilty. He wouldn't be the first person who ever pleaded guilty to federal charges because they didn't want to have state charges. They wanted to go to a nicer federal prison. None of them are nice, but they're nicer than Sing Sing. They're nicer than the state equivalent. And therefore, the fact that Cohen was so guilty, which everyone says, oh my God, if the messenger boy was guilty, certainly the guy who sent the message, Trump, ought to be guilty. Now, I believe Trump is guilty. I believe that if the federal government had a good charge against Michael Cohen, as it seems like they did, that as long as they got the underling, they should have gotten the guy who gave the orders. Having said that, I'm a federal criminal defense attorney, and sometimes it rolls my eyes that they'll bring my client in there. I've had clients who wanted to cooperate on like a Mr. Big, and I've had it where the government's been interested in having the underling cooperate against Mr. Big, and I've had it, Mark, where they weren't that interested. So I don't draw all the inferences that people do, and the main one that I draw is that while Barr certainly put the kibosh on that case at Trump's orders, in my view, so that they never went after conspirator number one Trump for this very nucleus of criminal facts that the DA is going after, that Trump gave the order to basically pay that hush money and then to cover it up by listing it as a legal fee when it wasn't a legal fee, and when Trump knew very well that he was breaking federal law and state law by doing that campaign violations, campaign contributions law. It does stand out to me as the most salient fact that when Merrick Garland becomes the Attorney General And when he's had the 2 years, that he could have appointed a special prosecutor to look into this 2 years ago, or to have the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland prosecute Trump for this, he declined to do it. And so that is why having the DA come along and do something which is the same nucleus of criminal facts as to this payoff, this hush money, this mischaracterization of the records, it does not have a great smell to me. And the last thing that I've tried to emphasize with you about it is that there's a statute of limitations. It may seem very inside baseball, but the statute of limitations is a huge deal. Like in some of these Me Too cases, in some of these sexual harassment cases, they've prolonged the statute of limitations. And as long as they do it before the statute of limitations has run, it's a matter of public policy. Do you think that you should have a period of repose? And there's a time when you look back and say, no matter what I did in the past, unless I murdered somebody, it's in the past? Or do you allow a 20-year, 25-year statute of limitations? I think Bob Dylan just got sued for something he did in the late 60s. Is that really a good thing? And people say, well, yes, it's a good thing. You should pay the price if you commit misconduct. And it goes back and forth, all a fair debate. But there is a 5-year statute of limitations in New York. This happened 7 years ago. You're going to ask me, how can you go back to something 7 years ago? One theory is that during the pandemic, the governor of New York prolonged, that is, made longer, the statute of limitations, added about a year. But it looks like that's more in civil cases than criminal cases. But let's assume it was in criminal cases. So there was 6 years. It's not been 6 years. It's been 7 years. So the only way that a judge will not dismiss this case against Trump, if brought by the DA, is if the judge concludes that Trump was continuously out of state. Now, Mark, what does that mean to be continuously out of state? Because you're president, you're continuously out of state. I ask this question: is Senator Schumer out of state because Senator Schumer from New York works in Washington, D.C.? The president, at least at that time, the ex-president, was from New York, but was president in Washington, D.C. I just don't buy that he's continuously out of New York. Even after he left the presidency, I believe that he's going to have records that he landed his plane in New York, somewhere in New York. It might have been in New Jersey, but somewhere in New York, that he got driven into New York, that he stayed at Trump Tower in New York. And if a judge decides he wasn't continuously out of New York, guess what? A judge is going to throw that case out as fast as Trump gets fingerprinted and photographed in New York City, let's say next week. And I don't think that's going to be a good turn of events if it works out that way, Mark.
No, he's already benefited politically. He's gotten a bump from all of this, and it is a circus, David. And you're right. And if at the end of that circus, he just walks, it'll have been a waste, and a waste in so many different ways. And then finally, in our last couple of minutes with David Katz, to the rest of the cases, you still believe the Georgia case and the Jack Smith case, the January 6th case, the one that Smith's pursuing. That's a federal case. Those loom as much bigger legal threats, I would think. Or again, review for us where you see those.
They loom as huge legal threats. I was just at a fundraiser for Adam Schiff, who's running for Senate. People have written me and say, "My goodness, you're not objective about that." I'm a commentator. I try to give people the emis on the law. If you went to a lawyer and you asked a lawyer, what is your opinion about such an issue? I try to give it. As I say, not right or left, just right, not wrong. So I try to give it right, not wrong. I also have political opinions like anyone else. And I worked with Adam Schiff in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We were contemporaries, colleagues, and I'm a supporter of his. Anyway, Adam even made that point the other night at the fundraiser, just 2 nights ago, which was that he regrets that the Attorney General didn't move faster on that. And if I can editorialize, I think that his committee and the compelling presentation that they made to the nation helped motivate Merrick Garland to get moving on the insurrection case, on the Trump's failure to secure the peaceful transfer of power. In fact, to do everything he could to thwart the peaceful transfer of power and to have a coup. That's what I think he did. I think he ought to be indicted for it. I think he gave an incendiary speech. He had others give those speeches. He said, go down to the Capitol. I'm going to be there with you. He meant for that to happen. I think that they can show that he knew that people were going there to do violence. And then he didn't tamp it down for over 3 hours. Once he saw on TV that violence was occurring, he could have tamped it down 5 or 10 minutes later. He waited hours and hours. In my opinion, he waited to see if it succeeded or failed. hoping against hope that it would succeed, that it would keep him in power. And only once he saw that the National Guard, the police really were showing up, despite, I think, efforts to thwart them from doing so, then he said, well, okay, go home. You're great patriots, but go home. That's what I think really happened. And I think he took those classified documents, and I think he obstructed justice. I think that could all be one case against him. And I think it's really a pity if that case doesn't go first. I think it does play into Trump's hands if you let the weakest case go first. And I do think that of the 4 cases, because I think the Georgia case is also a righteous case against him, to let what is the weakest of the 4 go first. And then especially if he gets perp walked through New York City and he can sort of play that as a martyr, as a guy who the Democrats just want to get, I think that would be a mistake. But I think it is at least conceivable that the district attorney there, Mark, has come to that conclusion and is maybe slowing things down. Maybe it looks like that the classified documents case looks much stronger because the courts, the federal courts, just allowed his lawyer. People ask, how can the president's lawyer, ex-president's lawyer, be called against him? Well, he can because the courts found that the crime fraud exception applied, that Trump, more likely than not, was committing a crime with his lawyer. Not going to his lawyer, Mark, for historical advice about something that happened in the past, but with the idea of committing a crime or fraud going forward, which was to keep the documents when he shouldn't have been keeping the documents and not giving them back and having this false certification done and all of that. I think there are 3 righteous cases out there. I just have some questions about the one in New York City over the hush money payment.
David Katz, everybody, go be on TV, you big TV star. Go ahead. See you. Thanks, David, so much.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Yeah, we'll see you next Thursday. Very, very cool. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.